Anonymous job applications are a new policy tool to combat hiring discrimination. Discrimination is still present in many contexts, but the access to jobs appears as a very relevant stage. Therefore, as it has been documented by a number of studies in many countries around the world, that there is a substantial extent of discrimination in this stage. Anonymous job applications now put a very simple and straightforward idea into practice. After removing any sensitive information that may allow recruiters to deduct minority status, it should become impossible to discriminate against these groups. A number of European countries have now conducted field experiments to test how these anonymous job applications actually work in practice and what the effects are when this new policy tool is introduced. These are mainly European countries because it seems to be the case that the information that is typically included in application documents is very large in European countries when compared, for example, to the United States. Based on the results of these experiments, it is now possible to assess the potentials and also the limits of this new policy tool. The underlying hypothesis is basically not very straightforward, but it's the hypothesis that actually when less information is available to recruiters, better outcomes and choices may result, at least in this hiring process. The results of the field experiments in European countries show in general that after the introduction of anonymous job applications, the callback rates of majority and minority candidates do not differ anymore. This is also what one should expect, since it's simply not possible to deduct the group membership status after any sensitive information is removed. This, of course, relies that the application documents are effectively made anonymous, which in some circumstances is not a very trivial task. For example, specific language skills may be a strong signal of a migration background. On the other hand, it's also necessary to have an efficient method of how application documents are made anonymous. So in this context, standardized application forms have proven to be an efficient method because it's actually the applicants who make their documents anonymous by themselves. This also has the advantage for recruiters that the application documents are very comparable because every information is basically at the same place in each application document. A more general point in this context is that the introduction of anonymous job application is context specific. So there might be the initial situation of discrimination, which is then prevented, but there also might be the initial situation of affirmative action. And of course, anonymous job applications would then also apply that basically employers are prevented from favoring minority candidates at the initial stage of the hiring process. Based on the current evidence, a mandatory introduction of anonymous job applications does not seem desirable. There is, for example, currently only limited evidence on the effects of anonymous job applications beyond the first stage of the recruitment process. One hypothesis in this regard is that discrimination may only be postponed to this later stage, so job offer rates may actually be still different between majority and minority candidates. Another hypothesis, however, is that when parties physically meet, so in the interview stage, discrimination is actually less severe. In addition, anonymous job applications do not seem necessary or also not feasible in each and every context. So for certain jobs and professions, for example, in the fields of sports and very creative jobs and highly skilled jobs, it does not seem feasible to introduce these new policy tools. Also, when there's a lot of competition or only few applicants, so that each and every applicant would be invited to an interview in any case, of course an introduction of anonymous job applications is not necessary. A more subtle thing that needs to be considered in the context of anonymous job application are the structural differences that may exist before. So for example, anonymous job applications shift the focus towards skills and qualifications. However, if minority and majority candidates systematically differ in these skills and qualifications, of course there will still be differential callback rates between those two candidate groups. So in conclusion, anonymous job applications have some limits, but they also have the potentials to eliminate discrimination at a particular stage of the hiring process. This is also, of course, on the other hand, a limit because they only target at this specific stage, and discrimination may be present obviously in many other circumstances, including stages before and after the initial stage of the recruitment process. So for example in the field of education, which is very important, but also later when it comes to promotions or wage negotiations.